President George Q. Cannon said he rejoiced exceedingly in the instructions which we had received that day. He trusted that everyone who had attended the conference that morning and afternoon felt repaid for the time spent there, and that this would be the case as long as their conference should last. It was a good thing for them to withdraw from worldly affairs for a short time, on such occasions, to come here, wait upon the Lord, and receive his Holy Spirit. It would refresh and revivify them, and they would pursue their various avocations with increased zest when the conference was over. In a pecuniary sense, too, they would lose nothing by the time so set apart. They had been endeavoring ever since to come to these valleys. President Young, his counselors, the 12 apostles, and those who, since the death of some of their leading men, had occupied their places, to convince the Latter-day Saints that the policy which God had prompted them to indicate to the people to pursue was the true one, and the one which in the end would result in great benefit and prosperity to them. It was that they should remain here in Utah instead of yielding to temptations to go where the prospect seemed more alluring. Especially was this the case in the early days in regard to California, and those who took the counsel of President Young in this matter had since seen the wisdom thereof. It had been so in other temporal things, but it had required faith on the part of the saints, sometimes to believe that the counsel given them by God's servants was the best. There had occasionally seemed to be a conflict between the counsel of their leaders and the inclinations growing out of the traditions of the people. But had the latter pursued a course different to that marked out, they would never have prospered as they had. There were now thousands of Latter-day Saints, some of whom had had an experience of 44 years since coming to these valleys, who could bear testimony to the fact in nearly every instance where the people had followed the counsel of God's inspired servants, they had invariably prospered and been blessed, and that where they had departed from it, they had lost not only in faith frequently, but financially. Referring to the Irrigation Congress recently held in this city, the speaker remarked that the universal testimony of the many delegates who attended it was as to the prosperity of this people. Every one of them who he had met had spoken in terms of unstinted admiration of the wisdom and success which had characterized the settlements and the building up of this territory. Those gentlemen actually admitted that they had profited by what they had seen in operation here, and had returned to their respective homes deeply impressed with the value of the lesson they had learned. They called it an object lesson. There had been no great monopolization of land and water here, as was the case elsewhere, men taking up large tracts and occupying them to the exclusion of honest settlers. And in no other part of this great continent did the poor man enjoy such facilities and opportunities as in Utah Territory. He did not believe there was another place in this broad country where, in proportion to the population, so many men occupied their own homes. The testimony of visitors concerning what they saw here is the beginning of the end, the beginning of that which the servants of God had foretold and the prophets had predicted concerning Zion. President Cannon mentioned also the abundance of free water for the use of the people, and said it was their privilege to continue under these favorable conditions if they would. If the people would take the course pointed out to them by God through his servants, they would see yet grander results in these matters. President Woodruff had made mention of the expenses which they as a church had had to bear, but they had been growing in wealth all the time, notwithstanding the trials and persecutions which they had had to endure. They did not seem like persecution now, and he had no words of reproach nor condemnation to utter. The Lord had overruled them for good, and such would be the case to the end. The speaker next touched upon the great changes that had taken place of late years in this territory, particularly in this city, Ogden, and in this county, and said these would probably extend to other counties. He had a great desire in his heart at this conference to impress upon the Latter-day Saints the importance of taking steps looking to the permanent relief of the needy or destitute in our midst, that in our prosperity we might not forget the Lord's poor. We were very likely to have an inclement winter, and therefore out of our substance we should see that none of God's creatures wanted for food or shelter. After a parenthetical reference to the marvelous productiveness of Utah's soil, President Cannon said it was their duty as a people to so organize that the poor in their midst who needed help should have their wants relieved. Bishops and others in authority should see to it, but while doing this, care should be taken to prevent the abuse of charity, and the indolent from taking advantage of it. All men should work to the extent of their ability and not live in indolence. He besought the Latter-day Saints to impress upon the minds of their children that all labor was honorable, They had sometimes been criticized because they had spent so much money on the building of temples and meeting houses. The people had said if they had erected colleges instead, it would have been much better. He believed that the results would prove the wisdom of the course that had been taken upon all of these points. Boys and girls should be taught to labor. College and book education is very useful, but all cannot devote their lives to the acquisition of that kind of education. He would like to see a good university established here to which our young men and women could go, without having to seek a finished education elsewhere. But he desired to see, if possible, manual training coupled with it. He believed the true course was for us to teach our boys handicrafts, instead of their being obliged to earn a livelihood by having some soft job. Let them teach their children to be industrious, and take their share of daily toil, rather than spend their life entirely in the study of books.